Okie doke. This is not a lecture about water pumps and their cooling efficiency or anything like that at all. How this came about, Julian has been looking at water pumps and having them built and distributed. Instead of selling the water pumps and the parts, it's becoming very, very difficult. So he came to me and asked me could I rebuild some, and I've been rebuilding them. And because I was only doing it the last few days, and I had the email from Sue Byrne saying that the lecture was off for tonight, I thought, well, I can waste 10 minutes coming in here and boring you lot to tears. Just to go back a few years, originally we had a water pump with an impeller which was cast iron from the factory and was a highly efficient little unit. It didn't cause a lot of problems. But we used to have a seal which was produced by PBR, which sat inside the water pump here, and if it packed up, it was only a matter of pushing the seal out, putting another one in, and Bob's your uncle, you're back on the road fairly quickly. However, over the years, PBR decided they wouldn't produce these types of carbon seals anymore. So we're placed in a dilemma of how we're going to keep some of the cars on the road. So there is a special seal which was produced and available ex-stock, and it comes like this. It's got a housing, it's got a carbon thrust, it's got a rubber seal and a ceramic. So the first thing you think of, okay, how do we attach this onto here and make it work? First off, if you've got the shaft here, it's not a fit on the shaft, so the thing can flip around, and people have turned around, put this back together, and the next thing they know, this rubber seal's gone, the water pump's leaking like a sieve again, and you're stuck up on the side of the road. This would be probably 15 years ago that I started playing with this. So what I would do was make up a little housing, and I'd glue it together and put it back in, and we'd put out a little notification about it and of how to go about it. And it worked reasonably successful, but not extremely successful. So Julian came, I then changed a few things. I made up a little housing for the ceramic seal to go into. So what I had to do was make up this housing like this. I used to make them in aluminium, but when I pulled some of them down, I found they were eaten away. So I decided to go to bronze. So what I do, I turn up this housing, and then I put this ceramic seal into that housing. It's a fairly tight fit to go in. But the trouble is, you've got to locate it properly. So you've got to have a dowel that will go into the water pump, then put this seal or the housing over it, and then drill 2 holes in there, or 3 holes, so as to locate it, so it's concentric. Otherwise it's of no use whatsoever. So we did all this. So Julian came over one day and he said, let's go through the whole thing and we'll look at it and we'll produce the document. Julian produced this document, which is fantastic, except I read it the other night again. We've put it at the ceiling.
There's a mistake in it.
Yeah. So anyway, passing it out to other people, we've found that people can't do it. But they haven't got the facilities to do it. That's the biggest problem, or the know-how. So what I do then, we've had these water pump castings made up over the years, but because they're gunmetal, they're too soft. So if we use the modern seal on it, whoops, this one, it just tears the gunmetal to pieces, and the next thing you've got a water pump leaking again. So that was then the next thing of how we're going to hold that together. So I made up this housing, put the seal into there, and then worked out the compression distance onto the seal to go back into the water pump. So theoretically, by using an extremely modern seal, which has a very small carbon ring and a ceramic disc with no friction basically at all, we should have a perfect seal. I rebuilt a pump the other day for Julian, and the thing piddled out so fast the car didn't get down to the first corner. So he brought the pumps back to me yesterday. So I had a look-see at what I'd done. I'd made one fatal mistake. When I set this whole thing up, and I used the dowel, and I set it all up in here, put it up on my drill press, and I drilled 2 holes in, or drilled 1 hole for a start. Then I put a dowel back in, an aluminium dowel pin in. Then I drilled the other hole. I've now got the thing completely aligned, made a mark on the side, and I'm now ready to go. So then, I then put this housing riveted back to the face of the impeller. And I got the leak out of it, and I couldn't work out why. So when Julian brought the pump back to me today, I have 2 countersinks inside here in the housing base, and when I've peened it in, I've actually spread the rivet underneath because it's at a dead end down the bottom, and it's lifted the housing up, and the water's then running past that, and you've got a slow drip, drip, drip all the time. So I mucked around again today, took all the pumps apart, levered the housing off here, took the ceramic seal out, and then flattened everything again on a glass sheet and wet and dry. And instead of peening them, I put them back in with Loctite and sealed the face with Loctite, and then put it back in the lathe and re-machined the housing out to make sure the heads of the pins were taken away and it's all concentric again. Then when I've got that all back together, I put the seal back into the housing, and I used some Loctite liquid gasket to go over that, which I had today, and I'm finding that sealing better. And then put the water pump's shaft back into the system, and then press the water pump impeller back onto the shaft until it's almost flush with the face, or just below the face of the housing. So this was the problem we were having sending this out to club members, because you have to machine the impeller down to get the compression for the spring on the carbon. And how can they do it? Unless you've got a lathe and reversible jaws and all the rest of it, you just can't do it. So what Julie and I have decided to do, if I can get it to work this time, any pumps we get in future, we will build them as kits, and then you'll sell your kit. You'll buy your kit from the club and you'll return your old one, and if we can rebuild it, we rebuild it for you.
So basically a bolt-off, bolt-on exchange unit rather than have people assemble them, because the failure rate's just been too high.
Now, if we had cast iron impellers, we wouldn't have to go to all this trouble, because the cast iron will work quite well against the carbon seal. So Julian's been looking at sourcing some impellers from overseas, but we need a shipping contract to bring the quantity in.
Yeah, I got a quote, but he only quote me a price by the tonne.
No.
Minimum order quantity of tonnes, which I reckon they're about 200 grams each, so we have 5,000 of them.
It should last a lot of any Bristol cars over the years.
So every single Bristol car will be required to take 10.
But anyway, if any of you people do have problems with your water pumps, you know the complexity now of what you've got to do just to get the seal to work. Have you had any problems with them, Robert?
Well, no. I actually have a lot of experience doing Rolls-Royce water pumps, which are pretty much the same thing, only bigger.
Yeah.
And I have the impellers made by a firm up in Queensland, cast iron impellers. And they make them in a nodular iron, and they are incredibly strong and durable, and they work perfectly against the modern seals.
Yeah.
Get the address off you.
Yeah, they're quite happy to do it. You have to have a patent made, of course.
You've got a patent.
But yeah, well, we'll have to look at that too, because what's the patent made to cast bronze?
It's made to cast gunmetal.
Yeah, it might be too big. Depending, see, the nodular iron actually has almost no contraction.
It wouldn't matter because these are machined anyway.
Yeah.
So you look at the size of it, you know, in comparison.
Yeah, it's not very big. Yeah.
It's a really good impeller nowadays, highly efficient. So if we could get that, that would be well worthwhile.
Yeah, so I don't see you'd have any problem with it at all, and it's strong enough to have a good press fit onto the shaft, and that's actually one of the problems with bronze impellers is because they're soft, they actually grow away from the shaft. The interference slowly disappears. Yeah, the reason you're having trouble with the probably the aluminium insert is you're probably machining it out of bar stock.
Yeah, well, that's all I had at the time.
Yeah, well, extruded or rolled aluminium has the wrong grain structure for water parts, and the water catches in. It's like having plywood, and it gets into the end of the grain and undoes the glue, if you like.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to ever use that, what you have to do is you actually have to have a casting and machine it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just an experiment at the time, and as I say, it didn't work, so I went to fossil bronze.
I found that out the hard way 25, 30 years ago, I think now, because the back of the cylinder blocks of 6-cylinder post-war Rolls-Royce cars have a plate on the back very similar to what a Bristol has on the back of the block. And we thought we'd be very clever and make these plates up out of 1/4-inch aluminium sheet. And we had to pull 3 or 4 engines out of Rolls-Royces and Bentleys for free to fix them. And we were just shocked at the corrosion, like within 6 months.
Yeah, it's quite surprising.
And so that's how then I made some inquiries and I found out what the problem was. And then we cast the plates from then on, and they've been right for ever since. Yeah.
Anyway, I it wasn't a big lecture about anything, but I just thought it might be interesting to people to know what we do have to do to try and keep cars on the road.
Colin, thank you, but could you just outline a little bit more information about the cooling system? I didn't realise that the water pump only really operates in the head, and in the block the water circulates by thermosiphon, and therein lies a problem.
Which is why you shouldn't let it get silted up. That's what those blocks. That's what those.
I wasn't going to give Colin's talk
plates at the end of
in actual fact, there's a better one than that one. If you turn the little tap on down near your fuel pump and it doesn't work, there's about time you took the end plates off your block and cleaned it out.
Well, if you could give a little talk about that, because I don't think
Julian can probably do it better because he put temperature gauges everywhere on his engine.
So I've actually got temperature gauges everywhere in my engine just because I was interested. And it is quite interesting because the block runs 10 degrees hotter than the head, which is actually good. Well, the water in the head. So the head on my car runs between about 120 and 150 degrees centigrade, depending on how hard I'm driving.
What was it like on that day when you chased the Ferraris, I wonder?
89, 90.
Of course.
The water coming out, so normally when my engine's just kind of tootling along, the block temperature swings from between 80 to 90. The head temperature swings from 70 to 81, 82, something like that. But what you do notice, like what happened on your car, is when the block itself gets silted up, because there's actually no pressure driving the water, the silt just sits there, and the block gets very, very hot, which is why when you open the tap, nothing comes out. Time to take the plates off and give it a damn good flush.
So, the lesson in the story is open the little tap every few months or so and just check to see where the coolant does come out. If it doesn't, the end plates have got to come off. You can do it in the car. I'm no mechanic, but even I managed to do it with a little bit of help, and you can just flush out the block and get rid of all the silt and put new gaskets on and put the cover plates back on, and then the whole thing is running at its optimum. And probably you should put coolant in it and not just
I
water.
always use coolant.
Yeah, and what sort of coolant?
I use Dr. Cool, just from East Coast Autos.
Yeah.
And I've double checked the water pumps and everything else, and there's been no problem whatsoever. I don't believe there's any aluminium deposits anywhere else in the block. I don't think there's any problem whatsoever with it. It's a specified Holden unit, so.
Well, I have a question, and please join in if you've got questions, but what happens with the little pressure relief valve with coolant? Because that's sitting sort of a little bit high and dry. Is it likely that that will gum up and jam?
Half of them haven't got a spring in there, so, or a stainless steel ball.
Oh, right, okay, well, because that has happened on my car too.
The pressurisation within a Bristol engine is about 5/8 of nothing.
It is.
You know, and really it has little effect. I don't think it's any effect. Neil Burns never ever ran with the spring in his or the ball, and I didn't run it in my car in latter years. I never bothered about it. The water level just sorted itself out, and it never made any subsequent change.
As long as you don't brim fill it. So if you brim fill it, then
It'll
you get
work.
this continual drip.
Yeah.
But as long as you don't brim fill it, it'll be fine.
Yes.
Well, I actually took that out of mine. I put a pressure cap, 5-pound pressure cap
Yeah.
on it, just to give it some pressure. And I've had no problem with overheating.
No.
Because after all, like every pound pressure is at 2 degrees centigrade, something like that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Over at the table? No?
So, Colin, what you mentioned earlier on is that somebody wishes to overhaul the water pump, should it have an exchange service with the club?
Yes.
Yeah. So rather than,
Ask the
what
jury.
we've previously done is sold the parts and said,
So you take
make them up yourself.
we
But
deliver
what we're going to do now is just sell you a complete pump. You send your old one back, and I'll send you a new
right,
one.
like we had once with the brakes, didn't we? So
Yeah,
there's-
we still do that.
do with the
We still
brakes.
do all the wheel cylinders, master cylinders. Yep.
What are you going to do if you get a pump that's badly corroded and you really don't want to give it back to the next person?
We've been it. So we've got castings. So
Oh,
we've got
right,
I've
okay.
got
Yeah, we've still got castings.
we've got castings. So in the past we didn't get them back, and look, if they're horribly corroded, you just
Bad luck.
there's nothing much you can do.
Yeah,
You just charge them extra.
you'd have to. Yeah.
I'll give you, so if your castings, so a built up pump is about $600. So they're not a cheap item anymore when you factor in the bearing,
Tell you, that's not expensive.
not compared to Rolls Royces.
No, not compared with all
A lot
the
of
European cars.
Yeah.
So if when you send back your water pump, we won't bother to use. There's no point trying to reuse that. Most impellers you won't be able to reuse. The casting would be reusable. If the casting's reusable, I'll give you a credit for the casting, which is a couple of $100. The whole assembled unit's at $600.
Yeah, I
It's a
think
changeover unit.
that's very reasonable.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Oh, just one thing. The people that don't have much facility, they probably can't fit the pulley either. Do you fit the pulley?
I can if they want to. If they send me the water pump with
Well,
the
they
pulley
really
on
need
it,
to,
I'll
don't
take
they?
the pulley off and put it on. Yeah. And sometimes, depending on the degree of corrosion, you've got to replace the stoves.
Yeah.